Welcome to Envizion More. Here, we dig deep into the insights of first-generation wealth builders, unearthing stories of passion, resilience, and relentless vision. Your host is Wayne Wagner Jr., founder of Visionary Wealth Management. So sit back and dig in. It's time to envision more.
The following episode is part one of a three-part series recorded on the topic of launching your year. Today's episode is on the topic of financial vision casting, the act of inviting your family into setting big goals and embracing transparency. Led by Wayne Wagner, we hope you enjoy the conversation.
So let me just tee up the rest of this. The rest of this is going to be, we're going to talk quickly about the 6 worlds. We're going to talk about 10 questions to set the tone for your year financially. We're going to pivot a little bit to go into kind of what does a family year-end planning look like, and we're actually going to use the questions that we use with my family, with my wife, my 2 kids at the beginning of 2024, where we spent 2.5 days together, and then we're going to end at 35,000 feet. 35,000 feet is the existential questions that really set the tone for everything that we've covered today and personal, psychological, spiritual growth in general. So with that as a basis for the rest of our time together, when you walk into my office at Visionary Wealth Management, or we jump on a Zoom call or a Teams call together, we really are going to spend our time working through the 6 worlds. And the 6 worlds are things like the areas of healthcare. Healthcare is, and look, I'm not a dietitian or a coach on that. So we're talking about your healthcare. How are you covering healthcare insurance? How are you covering disability insurance, life insurance, long-term care insurance? That's where healthcare comes into play. We're going to talk about your income. We're going to talk about how are you generating revenue today? How do you plan to generate revenue tomorrow? Are you planning on staying in the same career track or industry? Are you wanting to transition into a new phase of life where you're maybe not working for a large company, but you want to either maybe pivot to move to a small company, or pivot to run a consulting business, or farm yourself out on a portion basis, or how are you generating income, cash flow, revenue sources into your household? We're going to talk about your investments, and the investment of your time to generate revenue is part of that conversation. But it's our job at Visionary Wealth Management to help you accelerate your wealth and think about investments, not just in terms of how do we get you to retirement or some nebulous concept of financial independence, but actually to be accelerating that wealth. I have a client who underwent open heart surgery this week, and we took all of the non-retirement accounts, all the non-retirement investments they had in their house, and we put it in his name a week before he underwent open heart surgery. Why did we do that? We did that because if, God forbid, he dies on that table, his wife gets a step up in cost basis, and over $500,000 worth of capital gains that are exposed to taxes immediately that tax liability goes away. Because when somebody dies, there's a step up in cost basis to the beneficiary. And so we want to talk through the integration of investments and tax planning. We've had 2 clients in the last 3 weeks that have come to us and said, hey, we're working on buying a house. The dream house has become available, or our kids are having our first grandchild and we need to move across the state because we're retired. We're geographically not constrained, so we need to move across the state to be close to our kids. And so it's our job to help you manage the investments to maximize the impact and the returns, and also integrate that with tax planning. And if I understand taxes better than my first 3 CPAs, not nearly as well as my last or current CPA, but I'm an entrepreneur at heart. We're going to talk about tax planning. We're going to talk about, if you own a business, how to manage and maximize your tax strategy. We never talk about tax avoidance because that's illegal. That's where you go to jail. But we are going to definitely talk about tax management and tax minimization in all the legal ways that the law allows. We're going to talk about wealth. What is wealth? Wealth is, and what is the desired outcome or impact of the wealth that you have created. And we're going to talk about, and that integrates with legacy. And legacy is what happens when I'm not here anymore. What do I want to be the outcome? And so, whether that is passing money to kids, grandkids now or at death, working through philanthropy and philanthropic work and ministry work and charitable giving, using what you have today to maximize. If you're in a top income tax bracket, you absolutely should be using something like a donor advised fund to give money away now while you can get the maximum tax deduction for it, in anticipation of having years where you will still want to be giving money to organizations that are near and dear to your heart and consistent with your values, but you won't need the tax deduction, or the tax deduction won't have as much positive bite in those years because you'll be in a lower income tax bracket. So while you're in the high income tax brackets, let's take the tax deductions, let's get the money out of the way and start building up a legacy that will last, that allow you to be generous and benevolent when you're retired, and leave something in place for your kids to continue that theme when you're gone. So that's the 6 worlds that we cover when it comes to planning. Now, 10 annual questions for planning your finances. And this is stuff that you can come back to once a year, and sometimes a few times a year. But number one, what is our monthly budget, and what one-time or recurring expenses do we expect to have through the year? Look, if you have your car insurance is due twice a year, and you got to pay 6 months of it at a time, that goes under that recurring expenses, right? If we had a daughter get married this year, that's a one-time expense. God willing, it's the one time in her whole life. If it's not, the next one's going to be a lot smaller. But we had to budget for that as a one-time expense. And then what are our monthly expenses? So get an idea on what those monthly expenses are. How much revenue or income are we anticipating? I use the word revenue because that starts to click the mind into thinking of income in terms of revenue. That's function and act like a business. A business talks about revenue and profits, not income and savings. So let's think about our household budget as revenue and profits, not income and savings, because then we can start to think about, okay, well, how can I increase revenue? I could change industries. I could go for, one of the businesses that we have and my partners, we're making the decision. We can make good money selling pretzels for like $6 or $7 a piece on the boardwalk in Ocean City. We can make better money selling sunglasses, $200 sunglasses at a 50% profit margin. So am I selling widgets when I could be selling airplanes? So, let's talk that's where we go from shifting from income to revenue and savings to profits. That's how we want to think about, and how much are we planning and thinking we're going to generate over the next, on a monthly basis, on an annual basis. Maybe you get a bonus once a year. Maybe you get long-term incentives once a year that we need to think about and say, and the bonus is going to have a range. The bonus could be $10,000. It could be $100,000. Well, let's not spend in anticipation of that being 80,000 and then get a negative surprise that it shows up the bonus was only 30,000. And now we're in the hole. Right. So we go back to number one there. Number three, are we happy with 1 and 2 above? Do we need to consider a change in career, job? Do I need to start selling airplanes instead of widgets? What does that look like? Do we need to start a side hustle? I have a brother who is incredibly creative, and I'm monkeying around with him and encouraging him. Like the world of social media would be better if Josh Wagner had a channel, because Josh Wagner is an amazing human being with creativity who sees art and beauty everywhere. And the world would be better if Josh Wagner, right now he has a couple of things. I think he told me he made $7 or $6 from TikTok last month. And that's on stuff that he hasn't put up anything like 2 years. And so he's not going to support himself on that, but does there need to be a side hustle? Does a second spouse need to go to work at least for a season? I sat down with a couple this past week that they have 3 kids. 2 of them are in college now, and they will have 2 kids in college for about 6 years. And so mom went back to work as a nurse, making about $90,000 a year to be able to fund the kids going through college. That was the college savings plan. Mom stayed at home while the kids were at home. When the kids went to college, she went back to work to help pay for college. That's number 3. Number 4, what is our net worth? I mean, I have questions with this question from my new son-in-law. What is net worth? Like, what does that even mean? And then we start laying out and say, well, your net worth is going to be all of your assets. And again, when you're young, there may not be a lot. It might be my comic book collection and my sneakers and just a couple, the savings bonds that grandma gave me when I was 4. It could be very small things on the asset column minus the liabilities. And so, and Jacob, asked me, he said, like, I understand like the 401k and the savings. I don't understand like equity in the house. Like, I can't eat that. I can't spend that. Like, what value is it to have that on a spreadsheet somewhere? And so we're able to have that conversation, because at the end of the day, we want to grow the net worth, and we ultimately want to grow the net worth and replace line items or grow line items, take liabilities and turn them into assets. When we talk about liabilities, liability is a debt. So if I go out and I take on $200,000 worth of debt to buy a business that's going to generate $50,000 a year or $100,000 a year of positive cash flow, we call that good debt. If I go take on $100,000 worth of debt to buy a car that I can't afford the payment on, that's bad debt. If I'm sitting on $30,000 worth of credit card debt because I'm spending beyond my means and my ability to generate cash flow to pay those credit cards down to zero every 30 to 60 days, that's bad debt, especially in this day and age when the interest rates on that stuff could be 30% and you're not even looking at it. So what is the net worth? And number 5, are there any bad debts that we need to aggressively be attacking this year? So, and the difference between good debt and bad debt. So these are the first 5 things that we look at on the financial evaluation. Number 6, what are the areas in our net worth that are growing organically? Are there things that, hey, if we just perpetual motion, I'm putting $1,000 a month away into my 401k, or I'm paying down my mortgage, or I have a rental property where the value of the property is going up and the rent is being used to pay the mortgage down. So I have net equity growing in that piece of real estate. What are the areas, and how much under a base set of circumstances, if real estate goes up by 3% and the debt and the mortgage gets paid down by 2% and the stock market goes up by 6%, what's the increase in our net worth over the course of the next year if we just perpetual motion do the things that we're automatically doing right now? Because in your 20s, that could be zero. In your 50s, you could see a couple $100,000 a year or more being generated as you are now compounding the results and the returns of the investments and the management of that net worth over a long period of time. So, right. So, and I have things in there of college savings, investment accounts. If we're systematically dollar cost averaging, I met a guy last week who he was putting $30 a week into a mutual fund, and he did it for a bunch of years. $30 a week, the account's now worth $172,000. So, but he started that when he was really, really young, and he was like $30 a week. I can't do $100 a week, but I can do 30. And so now he picks his head up in his late 50s, and that account's worth $172,000. And it's a significant piece of his overall net worth and his savings that he has put away for retirement at this point. Review the estate plan. Are the wills up to date? Power of attorney and healthcare directives current. Beneficiary designations. Beneficiary designations trump your will 100% of the time. You cannot have those things in violation. You cannot update your will and say, hey, I want my wife to get my retirement account when your ex-girlfriend, when you were 18, is the beneficiary on your 401k that's now $2 million. If you die, the ex-girlfriend gets the money 100% of the time, because it's the beneficiary designation on a retirement account, on a life insurance policy that trumps the will. So don't update one without the other. Make sure they're working in conjunction with one another. The power of attorney and healthcare directives. Healthcare directive is, say, first of all, who's going to my defense to make sure this gets executed correctly? Who am I putting in charge? And number two, what do I want done? I pick on my in-laws because one of the cute things I saw in theirs was that, hey, we don't want to be intubated to have to breathe on a machine, but don't take out the feeding tube. So I'll suffocate, but I don't want to starve. But you want to make that decision. You take control of that. You make sure your documents are up to date on that. And the wills, think through it, an update, review those wills every few years. Did you move between states? There's different rules for different states. Did the kids grow up and you no longer need a custodian? Nate was the custodian for my kids, and I had another guy who was trustee. So Nate and that other guy were going to have to talk because I wasn't giving Nate the money and the kids. I was only giving him the kids. He was going to have to talk to the other guy to get the money. And I didn't trust the other guy with the kids. So I put him in charge of the money, but not the kids. So, it was, so you want to update that over time though, because that'll change. We put in there that, our kids could have $25,000 on the birth of a child within wedlock, because I didn't want to die. Have my 14-year-old daughter figure out that she could make $2,000 a month by getting knocked up once a year. She just so we put those things in there. Well, my daughter's now married and 23 years old, and it's probably not necessary to have that line item in the will at this stage. Review the insurance planning. Do we need to bid out the property and casualty, the house and car insurance? Do we have enough life and disability insurance? Review that stuff. Life insurance, people say, oh, I've got $500,000. I'm good. Yeah. You make $200,000 a year. If you make $200,000 a year and I'm trying to get you retired on $200,000 a year, I need 25 times $200,000 to get you retired. Mm-hmm. But you're saying you're totally okay because you got 2.5 times that. You got $200,000. You're making $200,000 a year, and you want your spouse and your kids to be able to live on that perpetually after you're gone. I need $5 million in assets, not $500,000 in assets, Jack. Mm-hmm. We need to have a different conversation. Now we can say, oh, maybe I don't need to replace 200,000. Maybe I need to replace 100. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's $2.5 million, not 500. Now don't go. I won't go down this rabbit hole, but don't be buying $2.5 million or $5 million worth of whole life or variable life or index universal, like the cash value stuff. Just buy term insurance for the time that you need it to cover. Disability insurance. Like we meet clients who have solid base income, but they get bonuses that are 50% of their income or commissions that are 50% of their income, long-term incentives. Hey, by the way, the disability insurance that your company provides you for free will cover 60% of the base salary, and that's got a cap at $10,000 a month. And it's taxable to you if you need it. And it doesn't cover your bonus, it doesn't cover your commissions, and it doesn't cover your long-term incentives at all. So you're making $400,000 or $500,000 a year across all those categories of income, and now all of a sudden you're bringing in $5,000 a month while your medical bills have gone through the roof because you're disabled. Might need to have a conversation about spending a couple of $1,000s a year on disability insurance to cover some of those incremental income you've got, right? Number 9, review your investment portfolio and investment allocation, the performance. Do you trust the people helping you make decisions on that point? And then the review, where are we relative to where we need to be? Rule of thumb is 25 times your annual spending in order to be able to be financially independent. Okay. And that's the old 4% rule. Okay. If you've ever heard somebody say that you can pull 4% per year off your bucket of capital and your principal won't go away. And that's basically historically, if you used a diversified portfolio over the past 130 years of the stock market and bond market performance in the United States, at any given point in time, if you retired and you were pulling no more than 4% off your bucket of capital, you would be able to inflation adjust that your income over time throughout retirement, and your money wouldn't run out before you die. Statistically speaking, not guaranteed in every situation, but that's the rule of thumb. And that's the same rule of thumb I just pointed to you on the life insurance side, right? And then that big question in terms of review, where are we in terms of achieving the amount by what age, right? So there's an old cartoon in the financial planning community. The guy goes to the financial planner for the first time. He says, I'm 62 years old. I retire on Friday. I haven't saved a dime. This is your opportunity to become a legend. And as financial advisor for 30 years, we've all had a few people that have come through our office that kind of have that mentality. I haven't saved a dime, and I know we're talking a lot to folks of faith and Christians today. I've interacted with a lot of Christians who just have a mindset of, well, God will take care of it. God will provide. And I would say, yes. And you have a lifetime of stewardship where you are living. We're talking to folks that are living in the United States. Yeah. You're in the wealthiest nation to ever exist, with more wealth to be created in shorter amounts of time. We are to be wise as serpents. We're to be good stewards. And when we do that, we should be acting and functioning in a disciplined fashion, using fundamental wonders of the world, like dollar cost averaging, like capitalizing on the compounding of capital, like having a mindset to accelerate wealth over multiple generations of our family, so that our children can be more generous than we are, so that our children can be more benevolent than we are, so that we can help them in their periods of need. And we must normalize conversations around these things. So, guys, I'm going at 187 miles an hour here. I'll hit pause at this moment. Can you guys add any feedback?
This is where I'd say I'm not a financial advisor, but I know a guy who is. So you're going to find me very quiet during much of this, Wade. I'm just waving the pom-poms over here and wishing I'd met you 25 years earlier. That's more it. Because there's just so much shame that comes around money, right? Because in my family, not only did we not have a list of things we just didn't talk about any of the things. Like, I didn't know how to balance a checkbook when I was 21, or even what that was. I was running a business at that time, and I didn't know about the simple basics of turning a profit. Even I was trying to gamify it more than anything. But no, at the end of the day, I think if people are talking about, hey, I need an advisor, and I know that, again, we posed the question to Nate. Wayne, for you, what's the simple rubric of this is my person with regards to financial advising? Like, how do I, if somebody's vibing with this, they go, I need Wayne Wagner. Do they even have access? Is there a minimum? There's a lot of questions that come up in this whole space here. Like, hey, if I have nothing, I don't know if I'm ready to call you. There's probably things I would need to do. Separate conversation, right? But how do I go ahead and just start making progress regardless of where I'm at? And we probably have a wide range of people that would watch this right now. Yeah. Where do I start?
Well, I think the response to that, first of all, we're putting out some content on the Envizion More podcast. And so you hear a lot of who I am and how I think on that podcast on the regular, and you guys are regular visitors there, and support players and helping lead that charge. So I'm just so grateful for you two. But the other side to this is, we're going to put out a series of podcasts late 24 into early 25. That's really financial planning by decade. What are the main topics you need to be thinking about in each decade, in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s? And so that's going to be great content. And then the beauty of having the entrepreneurial mindset that I do and building the business the way we have is that, look, if 5,000 people call me tomorrow, I don't have time for 5,000 appointments. But for you, the one person that is listening to this, give us a call. And I'll spend 15, 30, 45 minutes with you. We'll walk through where you are and what you need to do. And if we can help, great. If not, I'm going to point you to somebody in your region or somebody that you can trust, or an organization that you can trust to get started. And, we have, frankly, candidly, we have dozens of people who just check in with me once or twice a year, where we've had a conversation like that. We've kind of set the sails. It's not very complex. There's not a lot of moving parts. And so we get them headed in the right direction. And then we just check in every 6 to 12 months. And so, that's for a lot of folks, that's all that's needed. And then we get some more complex situations that are like, hey, we probably need to work together. We need to probably be a bit more hands-on. So we do those conversations on a no obligation, no charge basis all the time. So.
One of the thoughts I had as you were going through this is, I think in leadership, there's a tendency when things are going pretty well that we just set the cruise in the car at 80 and we just go. And we're just kind of making decisions. We're doing what we're doing. And I think one of the most crucial things is to be able to have the ability to identify what are the things that I need to slow down and I need to do a better extensive evaluation of. How, just because things are going well doesn't mean I just need to speed past it. How do I slow it down? How do I evaluate that? And so I think this is one of those things where, man, you got to go at 10 to 15 miles an hour as you're walking through this rather than at 80. And just because there's no major issue on the table doesn't mean that this is something that you should just set the cruise control at. This is Wayne inviting us to say, hey, I want you to slow down. I want you to go 10 to 15 miles an hour and reevaluate this to make sure that when you ramp back up to 80, things are in place the way that you want them to be in place. And I just think it's crucial that we figure out how and when to do that. And the invitation to do that is something that I think we need to heed. And this is one of those invitations.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Yeah. And if there's one principle I can give, if you're making less than $400,000 a year, married, filing jointly, you should be contributing to a Roth 401k and a Roth IRA. Don't be doing the pre-tax game and putting money into your retirement account pre-tax. If you can at all do it on the Roth basis. So I'll leave that. That's a just free shallow rabbit hole.
Yeah. I love it. I love these questions, Wayne. I love the questions you're about to segue into here. The 2024, like ending, we're planning, going into 2025.
Yeah. So let's transition then. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to give you the questions that my 19 and 22-year-old kids and my wife and I took the time to go through. So at the beginning of each year, we take, now this year we're going to do things a little bit differently because I now have a son-in-law. And Bryce has been dating Morgan for quite a while, and they're getting serious. And so Morgan and Jacob are actually joining us in this discussion. And so I'm going to provide the data, the content for this the first week in December. And then we're going to be away with an extended family between Christmas and New Year's. And we're going to take 3 2-hour sessions. But we've each got at least a few hours of work before we get there. And for years now, our immediate family has been doing this over 2 to 3 days at the beginning of each year. We've been doing this for about a decade at this stage. We started when the kids were in middle school, and it couldn't be 2 or 3 days at that point, but we would do like an hour session, like 4 1-hour sessions where we were working through things with them. And it's gotten more complex and more advanced as time has gone on. But this is where we start. What are the top 3 areas I'm most afraid of right now? Let's get deep. Let's normalize fear. Let's normalize hard. Let's recognize that most of the world deals with stuff. We're dealing. Look, Nate, you've got this word, champagne problems. Most of what we deal with in the United States are champagne problems. There's people in the world who make less than $1 a day and have no idea where their next meal is coming from. And that's not a small percentage of the population of the world. That's a high percentage of the population of the world. So, but what are the 3 top areas that I'm most afraid of right now in business, my personal life, my professional life, or my spiritual life? What am I believing about these areas today that I know needs to be challenged? So how am I thinking about this? And hey, God can't fix this. Like he can't, or I don't deserve for God to fix this. Right? I mean, how we view God impacts how we live. I married my wife when I was 22 years old. She was 21. We went up to upstate New York. I rented a 4-bedroom house on a 2-acre island for 2 weeks because I knew if I got her on that island, she couldn't get away. I hid the keys to the boat so I could chase her around the island for 2 weeks. We went off on a day trip one day. 10 days in, she fell and shattered 2 of her teeth in the front of her mouth. The immediate thought in my mind, my wife will be ugly forever because I've been bad and God wants to punish me. What do we believe about God? What am I afraid of? And what am I believing about that area of fear that I know needs to be challenged? I know that thought's not true, but in the moment, I still wrestle today. You know, is that big client going to leave? Is that I've sent 3 emails to that client. They haven't responded. Are they talking to somebody else? Is that relationship at risk? I function out of fear so much. So what am I afraid of? And what do I know? What am I believing that needs to be challenged? Let's get that on the table. Are there areas today that I do not give the people at this table the right to step into or ask questions about? Oh, man. Hey, Wayne, can I look at your phone and look at your browser history? Oh. What are the areas that I am not willing to let these people who are closest to me? What am I saying? You don't have the right. You can't go here. What are 2 to 3 areas I need to grow in personally or professionally in the next year? Where am I struggling? Where am I wrestling? Where do I know I got to pour into this. What am I committing to now that I'm willing to be held accountable to this year? Like in this area of personal growth and professional growth in the next year, what are 2 or 3 actions that I'm committing to this year right now to do this next year? I'm committing to read 30 books next year. Okay. That's 2.5 a month. That feels aggressive if I've never read more than 3. But in 2023, CJ read 32 books. Bryce read 23 books. Right. And they committed to read about that many more this year. So CJ's had a couple of things holding her back, like getting married and working on her Series 65 and life and health insurance licensing and all this other stuff. But, she's getting she's packing her stuff in a little differently this year. But what am I committing to? A year from now, what do I want my pastor to be able to say about me? I said some nice things about Warren Betcher on this podcast, on this webinar already, but our church had a men's retreat, and May and I have traveled a lot this year. We've been down the shore a lot this year. We've been in growth communities a lot this year. I walked into the men's retreat, and Warren walked over to me and said, "Are you new here?" What do I want my pastor to be able to say about me a year from now? Not, are you new here? I don't want him to have to ask that question, right? So how will those comments differ from what he would say about me today? In other words, how do I want to show up in that relationship with my pastor? Mm-hmm. Who are 3 people I want to learn from the most from spiritually this year? Is that somebody who I need to go read 5 of Tim Keller's books this year? Right? If I need to I need to commit to read 5 of Tim Keller's books this year because, Tim Keller's going to be one of my top 3. Or I need to, whether it's Trent Booth or Nate Wagner or somebody from your church, somebody in your community, who do I want to learn from spiritually in the next year? And what am I committing to foster those relationships? This is where accountability. I'm willing to commit to. I'm going to seek those people. I'm going to read the 3 books or the 5 books. I'm going to reach out and schedule a quarterly meeting with my pastor to be one-on-one outside the context of church, outside the context of church service and that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
What are my top 5 family relationships I want to pour into? And what does pour into mean? How many meetings am I committing to? What do I want to give and receive in those conversations? So I've met with Jake Booth a few times this past year. Why? Because Jake was one of my top 5 non-family relationships I want to pour into this year. And what am I committing to in terms of pouring in? What is the number of meetings? What do I want to give and receive in those relationships? Right. So are there 1 or 2 relationships in my sphere that are unhealthy for me today that I need help curtailing or eliminating from my life? Wow. Trent, you talked about red light, yellow light, green light couples, couple to couple. Are there 1 or 2 relationships in my life that are unhealthy for me? And oh, by the way, when you ask this in the context of 3 or 4 other people,
they're going to tell you.
And they go, yeah, you're admitting or confessing to that one, but there's another one over here that's way more insidious. This one's sucking the life out of you, and you're not admitting it. Right. So anything you guys would add here or questions or context?
No, I think this is one of those things that could go on for a long time, but I think you've encapsulated the personal development side of it, the relational connection side of it, the spiritual component is factored into this. And then ultimately how we think about just our emotional and spiritual connection in an interdependent way, right? The whole idea that I can't grow spiritually if I'm not growing emotionally and relationally. And so I think you've captured kind of how do we quantify that and how do we strategically move in that direction?
Yeah. Again, if people are looking at this, anticipating for 2025, keep in mind, Wayne is publishing what questions he asked back in January of 24 for 2024. So you could absolutely copy paste these for 25 and you'd be fine. Also, if there's an iteration of this, there's a version of this that you would prefer to do, like, hey, this one's not really us, this is us.
Yep.
Or even if I'm uncomfortable asking this because I haven't considered it yet, that's also fair. The point is you could pick and choose, you could cherry pick whatever of this serves you and your family. And having conversations is what matters here, right? Yeah. Engaging and starting, even if it's not going to be as robust as this. Keep in mind, this is the 10-year version, right? This is not year 1, right? So this is adults, just for context there. The point being, if you've never, right? And if we can go deeper context, Wayne, you didn't try to do this at a restaurant in January. You didn't try to do this around your kitchen table in January. You guys were on a trip. You guys had right a little siloed.
We travel beginning of the year between Christmas and New Year's or early January. May and I are part of a growth community of financial advisors, and last year in 2024 we tagged onto their trip. So they had a 3-day trip and we tagged on another 3 days. And
so I hear you saying you're supposed to be there, and I went early and brought everybody, so we could all enjoy this.
Yeah, Wayne. The thing I was thinking about is I know your family, I know your kids well. I know that this doesn't come without a little bit of drama, maybe a little bit of resistance, maybe a little bit of awkwardness. And so I think it's one of those things where I think as a dad, oftentimes I give up trying to have strategic conversations because there's awkwardness or resistance. Whereas, man, it's worth pushing through that. Maybe we take a break, we come back to it, but a willingness to keep creating the environment where these things are normalized, knowing it's going to create some awkward unsettledness, but a willingness to keep coming back to it and not just throw up our hands because it creates some tension.
Yeah. And listen, that is so true. It's scary to get into this stuff. It is scary to be vulnerable. It's scary to be questioned. It's scary to invite criticism. And yet the biggest growth things, and we do not do this perfectly. We do not follow up perfectly. We don't get our semi-annual this year was a couple of hours. I would have liked to have been a half a day. We did not get in 10 or 11 other monthly check-ins this year. Life got away from us a little bit. And so we probably only got half of those monthly check-ins done. But when we set the benchmark and say, this is what we're committing to, again, it's the kid in the backyard shooting at the moon with a BB gun. I'm getting closer than you are, old man. And that is, and I would rather be in a backyard shooting at the moon with a BB gun than sitting in a living room saying, I can't possibly hit the moon. You know, it goes with the old saying, you know, if you're shooting for the stars and you hit the moon, you still got out of the atmosphere.
Yeah. The perfect cannot be the enemy of good on this one.
Absolutely.
And the ideal cannot be the enemy of progress. And that's what we're trying to grow in a direction. As you said to me, you know, the master's level questions, like these are high level questions that are going to take some work. And if your culture of your family doesn't allow for that yet, then figure out how to begin to organically work in that direction, knowing that eventually from a high impact perspective, we want to get to a place where this type of stuff becomes normative in the culture that we're creating.
Yeah. Well, and to go back to the first time we did this, the very first exercise we did was that exercise of evaluate your relationship with each other person in the family and rank it 1 to 10. And there were tears and weeping and gnashing of teeth and raised voices and anger. And, you know, Bryce and May came in high-low. And, you know, and what came out was, you know, Bryce was being bullied at school. And he'd come home and he didn't feel like he could defend himself and protect himself at school. So when he would come home, there would just be all this pent up energy and it would come out in unhealthy ways. And so May was interpreting that as a low score in her relationship with Bryce. But now we're talking about it. Now Bryce is hearing that when he shows up at home, it's not, you know, I feel like our relationship is weak. It's like, no. I love you, Mom. What are you talking about? You know, but now that we're starting to have those conversations. Now, 10 years later, probably 12 times a week, I will ask Bryce and CJ and May individually, 1 to 10, how you doing? And 1 to 10, how are we doing? And I get instant answers. We get instant check-ins. Yeah. But it's been a decade of doing that. It's muscle memory now.
Sure.
And we've talked about and normalized and articulated what does, like, I don't think any of us have ever had a 10, right? You know, it's the definitions on what takes a 10 is like, you know, there's pretty special things that would have to occur. But at 2, we start putting away the sharp objects. So, you know, so let's talk about and identify what those things are. And if I'm showing what's my normative number? My normative number might be 7 to 7.5, right? So if I'm 8.5, I'm that's a pretty good number. If I'm 6, we start asking questions, right? So, but we normalize this stuff over time. We make it, and you're absolutely right, Nate. Perfect must not be the enemy of good here. So, the net worth, you know, how many times in our families, like, yeah, I mean, and again, you know, Trent, you said we blame, we shame, you know, I should have more, I didn't do, if I had, you know. But what if we just put out there a net worth statement for May and I in front of the kids once a year, and they see how we're assigning value to different things across our net worth, and they're seeing how we're putting that together. They're able to ask questions like, really, you guys only have that much in retirement accounts? Well, yeah, because we have this business and that real estate and the school and your private school tuition and college. And, you know, there's not a lot in retirement accounts, but there's these things and these other assets that we have because we've invested differently. You know, and then what businesses do I want to have equity in, and how can I contribute to the growth of that equity? So that question stemmed out of Bryce at 16 years old came to us and said, I don't want to go to college. I want to join Justice and Josh Voles in running Liberty Entertainment, and I want to help take that business to the moon. But Dad, I know how much you spent on CJ's college, and I know what you value Liberty Entertainment at. And if you don't have to pay for college, I want 5% of the company. And normalizing these conversations gives my 16-year-old the mental context to say, Dad spent money over here. If he's going to equalize it, he owes me something. Right. And so, and it doesn't, I could come back and say no, right? But when I have a 16-year-old who says, I don't want to go to college, and I say, you got to go to college, you got to have a plan. And he comes back with, here's the plan. I want equity in that business. I'm going to help that business become what it has the potential to become. I'm going to be an integral piece of the leadership of that team. I'm going to work alongside and grow to be one of the equal partners of that company over time. And I want an equity stake in the business to do that. And you're actually just being fair between and equalize. I'm not asking for something special here. I'm not asking for, a double portion. I'm asking for an equal portion. So that's so this is all the way down in the weeds, guys, right? So the last thing we're really going to do, by the way, I'll hit pause. I've been going again 180 miles an hour. So food for thought, feedback here, questions.
No, I think we're good. Yeah. Great questions and set up great conversations, I think, for the family.
Yeah. So
are there any new questions for 25 that you're considering, Wayne, that aren't here?
That's a good question. That's a great question. The short answer is yes.
Always. Sure.
Yeah. There's always some new questions. I am focusing on, because we're bringing 2 more people along this year for the journey. We are doing a little bit. We're going to go back up to 35,000 feet, because I want Bryce and Morgan asking these questions. I want Jacob and CJ asking these questions. And that's what really, so it's kind of a segue into the next piece here, where what you don't see here, because we've been doing it for a decade, is you don't see, who am I trying to become? What do I want the impact of my life to be? Where am I trying to go? What's a good life look like? Those are the existential questions we're going to touch on here. Yeah. And we don't ask them every single year, in large part because each of us has functionally answered those questions, and we're living out of that. Yeah. Right. You ask me, what do I want the outcome of my life to be? I say, hey, I want to carry enormous influence in every room I walk into, not because of the power I wield, or the power that I wield, or the position that I hold, but because of the net investments and net positive investments I've made in every room in which I operate, in every sphere in which I operate. And so that's how I function. That's how I my default setting is, how do I give more than I take, so that when the time comes, when the cause is great enough and the mission clear enough, I can garner resources and people to my side to go win the battle that needs to be fought. That's my default setting. And that day may never come, but on the day that it comes, I want to be the one who can speak and others will listen. So who am I trying to become? And I love the Gen Z picture that we've got here. So, like, who am I trying to become? That question is just core. And Simon Sinek wrote the book, and I guess that'll be the last one. But in order to accomplish what I want to accomplish, who do I have to be to accomplish that?
Absolutely.
Right. And what are the traits that go along with that man or that person? I want to be able to pass on multi-generational wealth. I want to, make $1 million a year. I want to be married to one woman and walk her or me to the grave. Who am I trying to become? What do I want at the end of my life? If they're etching things on my tombstone, what do I want? What are the things I want to be said about me and my character? So that's one. What do I want to be the outcome of my life? Right. And when I sit on the front end of this, and I'm the dumbest guy in the room, and so much of the financial planning and the tax planning, all this stuff, like I deal with facts and figures. You guys like deal with people's personalities and motivations and the stuff that you can't nail to the wall. Like the stuff I understand what do I want the outcome of my life to be? I want to give $50 million to charity before I die. Why is that my goal? Because it's simple. I can understand it. It's a number. I can nail it to a wall. Right now, it's a big goal, and I have no idea how I'm going to do it. But it's, and I want to be, I want to be a man of that lived with character, integrity, and poured into others, that developed other entrepreneurs. What do I want the outcome of my life to be? Where am I trying to go? What does a good life look like? Right. So, and life and lifestyle, right? Part of my own personal vision is that I won't have a traditional retirement. I won't hit 62 and then just sell the business and leave. I won't hit 65, 67, 70. Should God give me breath, I'd really like to be working at age 80. I don't want to be integral. If my business is coal mining, I don't want to be in the coal mine at age 80. But I want to be integral, and I want to have something to contribute.
Absolutely.
To my clients, to the business, to the vision, to my children. And I want to be able to travel with my wife. So that's life and lifestyle. And there's one, so we got the existential questions. There's actually one missing. So it appears that this is the last slide we've got. The last one's the big one. Why?
Absolutely.
Simon Sinek wrote the book Start With Why. He then wrote the book The Infinite Game. I found why to be kind of, what am I running from? Like what I want to be rich. Why? Because I came from poverty. I want to know how to generate revenue. Why? Because those who were around me didn't. So it was real drive. The infinite game to me is the I want to live in a world where it's okay to take my socks off and give them to the guy at Wawa.
So just by asking the question and getting curious, that was one of the other themes that arrived today. It was, hey, let's get curious. Some of this will fit for a lot of our viewers. Some might not. But asking the question, what can I apply here? What could make some sense? What does the Lord have for me next? I think is a fair question.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I just want to thank you guys. Trent, myself, my family, my teams have been enormously blessed by your expertise, by you and your coaching team. For executives and teams that are looking for somebody to partner with them, to help them grow the team, develop the individuals on the team, develop the culture within the team. They will be well served to reach out and find Veritas Leadership Group.
Absolutely.
Nate, you and Trent are not done working together by any stretch of the imagination. There's going to be a lot of cross-pollination for years and what I hope will be decades to come. But you having the courage to step out from 27 years in full-time ministry to create enough space for you to multiply your efforts, to work alongside of executives, ministry leaders. For both of you, this has been an act of courage, an act of faith, an act of vision. And I'm so grateful to each of you for being available to do something like this, for your support and partnership with us at Visionary and with the Envizion More podcast, and for the very evident outcome of your work in the lives of people I know and love, and for the many clients that you have and will serve for years to come by God's grace. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thanks, Wayne. It's also been a pure joy to send people your way. And if I'm ever in doubt, I'm like, you know what, just send them to Wayne, because I've seen you have lunch beyond just stacking chairs. I've seen you have lunch with people. I go, I'm not sure I'd be with that kid. I see you pouring into people and trying to be a sponsor. As much as the 50 million that you give away to charity will be an impact, I think there will be people in heaven that say, I'm here because of that guy. Hey, I made a dent in the universe because Wayne invaded my space and came in and helped be Jesus to me. I got to meet Jesus because of Wayne Wagner. Brother, thank you for the work that you're doing. And I know I can speak on behalf of Nate as well. We don't make these big moves without our friend, brother Wayne saying, hey, what's possible? What else could you do? What else? Is it time? What would be required? And, and I know that you hold that space, not just for us, Wayne, but for your clients. And again, it goes so much beyond being a financial advisor. I'm grateful that there's that podcast. Envizion More is the place to go to if you want to discover more about Wayne and the Actuator Leadership Group. Is it Actuator Leadership? What's the best place to find you, Nate, if people want to follow up?
Email me at the actuatorgroup@gmail.com. I'm working on the website. All of the other pieces and parts are coming, but just excited to have an opportunity to respond to the needs that are out there. And clearly it continues to be something as we've just identified that there's an opportunity to help people go further, faster, and get their legs under them. Wayne, you've identified specifically the opportunity to envision for people a greater future than what they can envision for themselves. And I think it's one of the greatest blessings that we can offer anybody. And it's got to start with our own space.
Good. Of course, you could reach any of us through Visionary Wealth Management's website there. Wayne, what's the actual address there for Visionary?
Visionarywealth.com. Yeah.
And veritasleadershipgroup.org. Not as easy as visionarywealth.com. But again, you could reach any of us through any of these addresses there. We would love to follow up with you. And I'm hoping that you're not sensing that you need to break glass in case of emergency, but this is an invitation for you to connect with us. It's been an absolute pleasure and joy to spend time with you today, gentlemen. Circled this date on the calendar many, many weeks ago in anticipation of just sharing some thoughts and ideas and collaborating, and hopefully it's the first of many to come. Hope you enjoyed Mapping 2025 and that this has set the table for you for your best year ever and beyond. God bless. Thank you for listening to the Envizion More podcast with Wayne Wagner Jr. of Visionary Wealth Management. We hope you were encouraged and inspired by the conversation today. If you want to dig deeper into the show notes or Wayne's work at Visionary, you can find us at envisionmore.com. That's Envision with a Z. Advisory services are provided through Wealth Plan Investment Management. Wealth Plan Investment Management and Visionary Wealth Management are separate entities. The content is developed from sources believed to be providing accurate information. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult legal or tax professionals for specific information regarding your individual situation. The opinions and material provided are for general information and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. Thanks for listening.